Good morning and welcome back. Today we have with us the wonderful Claire Lowson. Claire's an accomplished and award-winning brand professional, influencer and coach. And we're going to speak a little bit about her background and supermenopause, which I'm sure we'll cover, but it's works across all sectors, offering menopause as a lever to educate women within a background of health and longevity. And so I guess, it's great to hear from you and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
But I guess, I always start asking guests a little bit about their background and how they kind of got involved in the women's health sector. So it would be great to hear about that.
Okay, thank you. I think I've always been interested in health. I've always been interested in health for sure. I've always been interested in longevity, even as a young person, which is maybe unusual, I don't know. Certainly it wasn't a kind of cool thing when I was young, but I just always have felt that I've been interested in optimizing potential and, living the best life that you can for as long as you can. Even as a child, I used to get my friends to kind of, go around the village doing laps, or I'd time them. I was always trying to improve their performance. And so that's coloured my whole life. And I think that I've always kind of felt that, we all should naturally aspire to just keep going forever. But as I got older, I realised that that's not the way that everybody sees it. And at a certain point, people start to change their language and change their kind of connection with the world and start to rejig things according to this kind of, as if they're going into this kind of slow decline. So I was really fascinated by that. COVID came. And during COVID decided to start HRT, which was something I researched and looked into, but I realized there was very, very poor information around menopause, and that, again, that was a big, brought with it a big emotional kind of, negativity, a lot of baggage for women, that if you're in menopause, you're kind of definitely now into older age. And I wanted to really look at that and think about that and why that is. And it makes no sense at all, because obviously these days, most people's longevity is a lot longer than they think. It's probably, on average, they say it's 10 years longer than most people think. You can go online and do these various kind of calculators, and most people would come back with the calculations that's 10 years beyond what they think. So I think, if you think about perimenopause starting in your 40s, you're not even halfway through. So it absolutely has to be challenged, that that menopause is a signifier of older age. And actually what it does do, I think, is offer a real opportunity, because what is completely clear through everything that you read, and this is, evidence-based, women who have had more health issues probably will have a harder menopause. Women who are not in as good health or don't have as kind of healthy habits will have a harder menopause. And actually, whatever your lifestyle, menopause brings you up close and personal to what isn't working. So, a lot of people at this point would give up alcohol, or certainly reduce their alcohol intake. Lots of people change their diet. I mean, it's a really good thing. Menopause is not the only lever in life to change things. When women are pregnant, they stop drinking, they'll stop smoking. And we have these kind of transition points in life where we have the choice to make changes. And I see menopause really as that. It's another platform, another female transition, which you can manage, in a variety of ways. But it does present an opportunity to really look at what is working for you, what isn't working for you. And actually, I would always argue that people need to massively ramp up their expectations of what's possible beyond. And I think that's where I've kind of used it, because I work in branding. I've been a brand consultant, strategist all my career. I really think that age has to be rebranded, because we are very much held back by this idea that, age isn't glamorous, age isn't sexy, age isn't really, it's not very cool. It actually is all those things. And as the population ages, and the majority of people in the world will be over 50, over 60 even, of course it's going to shift, because there is massive consumer power there now, but it's less seen. It'll become more and more and more seen. And once those people are having that weight and power, once brands start to talk to them differently and market to them differently, then, it will become much more kind of glamorous than it is now. So kind of gone all around the houses. But yeah, during COVID, really, I started to look at really developing a business more around this area and the need for it. And as the kind of menopause market has kind of grown and flourished over the last 2 years, for me, it's not really just about menopause. It's not. It's about a lever. It's about seeing this as an opportunity to change for the better and to really kind of take everything that midlife throws at you, because it's not just menopause. It's elderly parents. It's there are a lot of rites of passage you go through. Maybe losing your parents. It could be having young children. I have very young children. That's that I think that's very healthy actually, but it's a very busy time when you've got elderly parents and young children. It also can be teenage children, exam stress for children, and then of course it can be empty nest syndrome. It can be women who've never had children who are then having to kind of work out what they really want from the rest of their life. So I think whatever your choices, midlife does bring an opportunity to kind of take stock a little bit, and I would argue that at a halfway point it's really good to take stock.
Yeah, 100%. I think that reframing of menopause is kind of like a time where you can, really look inwards and like reevaluate your health and make sure that you're making the right decisions. Is a really good way of like reframing it. And you kind of mentioned reframing it in a positive way. What kind of attributes of age and menopause, for example, do you kind of play on or like try and emphasize in your work that you do?
Well, I think there's a lot. I mean, we don't necessarily play on, like I say, I think it is a time when women will look at their health more explicitly and maybe be prepared to make changes they haven't made before. So we can show women by making those changes that they will feel better with a healthier diet. They will feel better with perhaps a reduction of alcohol, whatever works for them. So there's a lot of that in the mix. And then we tend to use the framing of a 150-year life. We don't talk about the 100-year life, we talk about the 150-year life, because that is a big enough jolt to get anybody out of their slump. Because suddenly they're like, oh my God, that's like really long. And what am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with that time? And how am I going to be sure to really, I don't want to be dragging through all those years like some kind of, defeated, tired, whatever it is. So that we use that as a frame to kind of start people to try and get them to reconnect with a sense of future and a sense of ambition and optimism. And then within that, there are lots of specific things we look at. Tend to depend who we're working with, but we work around, kind of clarity and focus. There's a lot you can do to improve your brain health in terms of warding off some of the older age diseases like dementia and so on. I mean, even if you have the gene for Alzheimer's, it's like 80% lifestyle related, 20% gene, and a lot of people don't have the gene. So we know that there's a lot you can do with exercise, with nutrition, with stress management, with sleep. I mean, 4 very simple principles to manage a lot of those kind of things that we tend to associate with older age. But we also look at the capacity to focus. So people in work, we know that women over 40, women over 50 are the fastest growing. Women over 50 are the fastest growing workforce demographic. But there's massive attrition. Women over probably 45, there's massive attrition out of the workforce of those women. The workforce can't tolerate that at the moment. We've got an aging population. We've got massive holes in the workforce. Rishi Sunak is talking about the midlife MOT. Loads of people in the UK fell out of the workforce during COVID, have not gone back. In other countries, they have gone back more than in the UK. So we've got that kind of attrition that we cannot afford. And if companies work out the knowledge in their business that those people hold, if they've been in the business for a long time, absolutely cannot afford to lose them. And the cost of replacing them for somebody that might well leave for the same reasons a year or 2 down the line is just no financial director wants that on their watch. So we also, a lot of the work is we start with this idea of the 150-year life to try and get people to see that they are completely relevant. They are relevant. Their experience counts. Where they sit is probably not just ticking one box. They actually cover loads of boxes. So it's really about rethinking and retelling your own story of where you've come from, where you're going to. And then we look at really specific work that can help people, you know, feel that their memory is still strong. I mean, it is still strong, but we can also work at strengthening memory, strengthening focus, avoiding distraction. And these are not issues that are actually really hitting people over 40 or 50 more. We know that, you know, we're in a world of noise and distraction. Nobody can concentrate now like they used to be able to. And that goes right down to children. The attention span of everybody is dropping because of tech and our kind of constant intrusion from Instagram, from emails, from, you know, whatever it is. So we can do a lot of work around a kind of mix of areas to kind of help people feel more in control of a lot of different elements. And we work around a 3-phase. We call it reframe, realize, and refocus. So the reframing is the whole get with the idea that you have a big future ahead of you, and that it's cool to be old. And then the refocus is really looking at where the best changes need to be, and then realize is kind of bringing those into part of your bigger plan or goal achievement or whatever it might be. And a lot, if we work with corporates, then the realize bit would also be really embedding that work into the fabric of the culture so that it's always going to be there from that point on. And we know that millennials burn out. You know, with the millennial burnout is a big issue at the moment. We know that Gen Z come in needing slightly different structures and different systems. Their mental health is poorer, their anxiety levels are higher. And actually pushing the kind of scope of age and establishing the idea that you will still be active and contributing at 70 and 80 and 90, it really helps everybody because it kind of gives everybody breathing space, and it really allows people to grow into the person that they're meant to be, rather than feeling at the moment, and for women in particular, really feeling like you have to race through all these kind of, hurdles to get to a certain point at a certain age. And we want to push back on all of that, because as we live longer, all those kind of markers have to slide back. You know, we can't, it makes no sense that we finish our education at 22 if we're going to live to be 120, does it? I mean, it makes no sense at all. It makes no sense that you have to find your life partner by 30, because, you know, you're going to be around for a long time yet. So kind of reframe, I guess, changing people's perspectives a little bit to open up potential.
Yeah, definitely. I think it seems like a lot of it is focused on that, adding in that confidence to women's life in particular, where it's particularly when women go through menopause, I feel like you lose a bit of confidence, and that I think the work that you're doing to kind of re-establish that confidence and realize that even if you're saying things like the 150-year life, it's not necessarily that people believe they're going to live to 150. It's the fact of reframing it in a positive way that you feel confident about it. So I think, no, that works really amazing. And so this is with your business, Supermenopause. So I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of how you set that up, the kind of the day-to-day work with that, and
Well, I've always worked with corporate clients, so I've always done a mix of brand consultancy and coaching for a long time. So I first kind of did a coaching qualification around 2004, 2003, 2004. And I'd worked in a company called Imagination, that is the big brand experience company. I worked on the Millennium Dome. So it's always been around storytelling, and a lot of it was B2B work, but using kind of, you know, getting people to learn experientially and so I was interested in kind of developing that within businesses, so that businesses don't just use that to talk to their customers, but how they really develop their people internally and keep them in that kind of energized way and build really positive internal culture. So the first, I ran a program called Energy Lab for quite a long time, and our first Energy Lab was designed for Lloyds TSB in 2004. So Energy Lab wasn't really focused on age. It was, though, designed to, at that point, in banking, there had been kind of early retirement paths from your kind of mid-40s, and that was starting to shift. And so the general feeling was, well, if somebody's, kind of reached their peak in their mid-40s and think they're aiming for early retirement, what do we do to keep them in the game if they actually need to stay for another 10, 15, 20 years? So the work that we did around Energy Lab was really that, helping a great team not plateau, but in fact raise their game and go to be a super team. And we looked at things around, again, it was like reframing the future, creativity, innovation, motivation, all of those principles. We didn't look at health as an explicit thing there. So this time around with Supermenopause, it's not dissimilar work. It's really continuing to work with clients in a similar way, always run kind of different programs, which might be, it could be a 2-day intensive face-to-face out of the business. It could be a mix of coaching and some face-to-face work. Of course, now we work a lot more online. We do a lot more video-based content as well. It's really a mix. We also go into companies as a senior. We can. One of the issues, because I work in branding, there's a different take on this from the consumer side. Women not represented in brands effectively. Fashion doesn't really feature women of, 40, 45 plus. It tends to be always focused on the younger market. So we know that brands have to brand this age differently, and it's a vicious circle, because if they don't have senior women of age in their business, on their marketing teams, then they're not going to see those opportunities effectively, and they're certainly not going to market to them effectively. And we all see really cringeworthy marketing campaigns coming out, like, who the hell thought that was a good idea? Where's that coming from? So what we also operate is a kind of like a senior female lens, where we would go into a marketing team and they have to be open to it, to help them see what the growth opportunity is, what the real branding positioning ought to be. And then eventually, of course, again, we would always want them to embed that within their own business. So we offer a mix really of training, transformation programs, which are kind of coaching and training, and consultancy. And an ideal client, of course, we would run all of that together.
And how has it changed over time at all? Have you changed it from, obviously you do a lot of work, you said face to face or even online, and speaking to different women and different businesses? How has your approach, or has it, if it has at all, kind of changed throughout that?
I think it hasn't probably changed that much, but I think inevitably we will end up doing more online programs for women to buy individually, because we've always been selling to corporates. But of course, there are women who want to tackle some of this stuff in their own time. They don't necessarily want to talk about it at work. They might want to leave their job and set up their side hustle or whatever it might be. So I think what we have to develop next is a completely, online course where people can buy it and run it at their own time. We don't have that running live yet. So that's in the mix. But I think in general, it's just building up traction. I think the area of real interest now, because of course, we started with the title Supermenopause, and that was a bit of a kind of pushback on some of the menopause kind of like doom and gloom and fear mongering.
Yeah.
It was really to say, yeah, no, we don't see it like that. We're not that. We're saying that menopause is really an opportunity, and it is an opportunity for a company, for a culture, for a woman, to change the nature of your kind of, communications, your transparency, all sorts of things. But I think really now this massive issue of the attrition in the workforce of older women, and the gender pay gap massively widens at 50 plus. That is the next big thing. That has to be solved, because if we're going to keep women in the workforce, we absolutely have to make sure that they're equitably rewarded. It's hard for them to stay in. They do end up with the bulk of elderly parental care. They do end up dealing with a lot of the issues that growing up children can bring back into the household, and they're in senior roles at work. And we know that, people of all genders if you do that, you can look at the stats for this. People of all genders will opt often to be managed by a senior woman. And that's because women naturally lead in a different way, and they are interested in the development of their team, and they've kind of got that like whole empathy going on maybe in a different way. So we know that younger people of all genders like senior women line managers, senior women leaders, and yet we've got a lot of those women leaving the workforce and certainly not being fairly paid. That has to be dealt with next.
Yeah, I think it's not even that there's necessarily one type of like leadership that's better or one type, but I think having that diversity and representation across leadership, I think is the key point, where it's like people can mix and match and there is someone for everyone, and people can have different people they aspire to that look different and act differently. And I think that's definitely a massive thing that we also do at Screaming, with that retention of women in the workforce is such a key. It's not necessarily, not everyone wants to stay in the workforce, but I think having that option and creating a space like what you do where you can work with women where they feel heard, I think is really important.
And I think also we have to be clear about the economic imperative for people to stay in work. If you're going to leave work, be clear what you're going to do, because we know that people left during COVID and are now slightly twiddling their fingers thinking, well, what now? What now? Because actually to ride, the idea of retirement, if that's like nice holidays, massages, nice lunches, of course, that's really seductive. But actually, people are saying, well, I quite quickly get bored of that. It doesn't really fulfill me for long. And we know that there's always been this kind of retire and die, scenario. People don't necessarily thrive after retirement. It can really accelerate aging. The brain can literally start to, reduce when it's not being used. It's a muscle when it's not being used in quite the same way. So I think that there's a lot of the framing that we do is around what does make longevity, and it is quality of connection, and it's quality of contribution, and it's feeling valued and staying involved. So staying in work shouldn't be something that feels onerous. And like, of course, there was all of the kind of pushback in France when they put the retirement age up. It has to be seen as like, well, if you're going to live to be 100, 110, 115, then actually to retire at 60, that's a long chunk of life to have to find meaning and purpose in, and you have to live, you have to pay for your older age too. So it's a complex argument, and I've always advocated that everybody should, not you do the work you love, and I would work with anybody that I'm coaching to help them do the work they love. And of course, when we work with a company, we try and make sure that everybody is really thriving and fulfilled in that workplace. Ultimately, people have to do work they love in order to stay in work for the best amount of time for their kind of commitment and contribution and earning capacity.
Well, yeah, I think also that's a privilege in itself, because obviously not everyone's able to find that straight away. But I guess that's part of your reframing of age, and the fact that by the time you hit a later on in life, then you perhaps would have tried a few things and be able to have a bit of a clearer idea of what you think gives you actual meaning and purpose in your work, or if it is outside of work as well. I think what you do in giving people the option basically to choose whether
also,
they work is good.
It really shifts, because I think not everybody wants to work full time. Of course, we're not saying everybody wants to stay in these really high pressured, high powered jobs, and it might be that in fact in older age you do want to take a different kind of work on. I've got a really good friend who was a really high powered detective. She did that for 35 years. It's really tough to stay beyond that in that line of work. It's too tough. It's shift work. It's exhausting. It's mentally very, very, it's hardcore. And she now works for a university, advising them on, career paths, working with kind of all the kind of undergrads and postgrads. going on to build their careers, and she works for the Samaritans. So she's, you know, she's using her experience in different ways, and it's giving her much more flexibility and much more chance to now rebuild her own kind of health, which, you know, that's quite hard through that kind of career. So there are lots of different avenues. And there are lots of different ways of companies thinking about this in different ways. And that's what we want to encourage. So John Lewis, I mean, I don't know what they're doing now. It was some years ago I worked with them. When their alumni, they really retained their alumni network. So if you'd worked for John Lewis and left, then at Christmas time, when they needed extra staff in store, they would recruit back in their retired workforce. So as a retiree of John Lewis, it means that, you know, at peak times, you can volunteer to go back in and work. It's not a real long-term commitment. You do the hours you want, you earn, you enjoy it. You know, everybody said they really loved it, and you're still part of the staff network. You've got your connections. You do, you know, you're going to the Christmas party. You still kind of feel like a valued contributing member of staff. So there are real, I mean, not just John Lewis, there are companies looking at quite interesting ways of building flexibility and a variety of options in, and for different stages of roles, because of course not everybody's in a lovely, fulfilling, you know, cerebral, intellectual career. There are a lot of people that are doing much heavier lifting jobs that don't work so well in old age. But I guess it's about, yeah, working out how you can kind of find what's going to work for you in the best way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that flexibility is definitely a really key part as well. And then you've kind of touched on it there, but I guess I'd love to know a bit more about how we can work and how we can challenge perception of age across all ages of life, and not just have it as something that you only start thinking about as you hit, say, menopause, or say the later stages of life.
I think that's the brand part of it, really. I think that if the focus of branding shifts from being youth is everything, which it is now, it can't be. It can't be that women think that, you know, they've got to look amazing. I mean, I've got women now that'll come up to me at 23, 25 and say, you guys think you lose your identities when you start to be perimenopausal or menopausal, but we never have our identities. We never get them now because we're on social media since we're children. We're comparing ourselves all the time. We're so confused and conflicted about all the different options open to us. Like, should I be now getting to get a job? Should I leave university and try and get a job at Lloyds, or train to be a professional, be a lawyer? Or should I be on a beach in Thailand, remote working in my bikini, building like some cool business? Like it's all there, and they see everybody doing that all the time. So I think that by trying to show brands the commercial opportunity within the older age group, and getting them to reposition age at school slightly shifts the pressures of, you know, it all being about 25 and beautiful, and that's the only thing that counts for younger people. Because actually, you know, for me now, you know, when in Victorian times, women had to wear corsets and bustles, and they couldn't have run away or, you know, done anything very much. And then when I was leaving school, it was all kind of like, you know, boob jobs and cosmetic surgery. And now, of course, it's fillers and Botox. And I think it's really shocking how many girls have got, like, you know, are using Botox and fillers and hair extensions in their 20s and slightly regretting it, but not knowing how to come back from that image that they've built of themselves. So it's kind of, I mean, that's very simplistic, one-dimensional. I'm just thinking of, you know, one example, but I guess we have to help everybody see that longevity is good, older age is good, and it's good because of the whole person, and it's good because it's not ever about the exterior only, and the exterior is never the whole story. It's not the whole story when you're 80, it's not the whole story when you're 20. And really building a strong and healthy life has to start young, and actually focusing on health rather than looks, and mental health as well as physical health. It's all in there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really key point, in the fact that, yeah, it's not about the external the exterior of what apparently looks good at the time. I think it's about the actual health and like well-being of the person is so much more important.
And finding out yourself, working out who you are, and being true
Mm.
to yourself. Because I'd equally say that we do want to still be looking good at 70 and 80. I think that is what we're talking about. We're not, we are saying that good health comes from the inside out. People who've got vitality and energy and good, great health do look good, but
Mm.
it's not a superficial kind of, like fake thing. It's coming from radiant health, which is,
And that
much
confidence.
more, yeah, and confidence and knowing who you are. And they're the solid factors that, the sooner you can start to focus on them and realize the power of them, the better.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, yeah, no, a really key point as well. I guess as we draw to the end, is there anything else that you would kind of want to say to listeners? Anything else about, yeah, supermenopause or yourself, or any other point that you would like to say?
I think really it's just that I think women get, quite a kind of, it's tough, isn't it? You get a kind of, you always treated like you're the kind of second kind of sex. But actually, for me, women are tested and prove themselves at many, many ages. You are managing your menstrual cycle for most of your, for years. You manage that. You do exams that might not be at the optimum time in your cycle, because we know that sometimes you feel great and sometimes you shouldn't really be doing anything that taxing in your cycle. So we manage that for years. We manage fertility, we manage, contraception, we manage having children if we want to, or we manage not having them if we don't. There's a lot. Then we manage pregnancy and child rearing. And then suddenly, somehow, with menopause, people see that that's the big, oh my God, she's hit menopause all over. For me, it's another transition. And all of those transitions build women just as they would build men. If men are going through health scares, various rites of passage, cancer, we know that all these things can build us into stronger versions of ourselves, but women just have them biologically. We have to pass through these various biological transformations, and we grow with all of them. And you can, at work, that if you look at the kind of logistical capacity of a mum of young children to manage a lot, it's all there. So we learn, we adapt all the time. So absolutely, we are of more value with every single transition point that we go through. And menopause is another one of these. So absolutely, it makes sense that we are at our strongest post-menopause. And we also know that at that point, the brain is in a different kind of platform. We're not going through the cycle. We're not going through the kind of peaks and troughs that your normal monthly menstrual cycle takes you through. And that actually, post-menopause, you get on a kind of more of a higher level that you stay on. So your energy can be much more regular and constant, which is fantastic. I mean, that is where, we want to be. And I think once women can get that and understand that, oh my God, I can have the most energy I've ever had at this age. And I had my children very late, in my late 40s. And so many people say, oh my God, how could you do that? Because I've got all the energy that I had in my 20s. I don't feel any different whatsoever than I felt in my 20s, except for I don't have PMT and I don't have, there's kind of exhausted days of being on my period. I don't have them anymore because I've passed through that. So, I think it is, the sunny uplands are there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's like you've got to accept that each stage of life is going to be different. And even 5 years ago, you'd be different from what you are now at any stage of life. And I think that's something that we should see positively, because you wouldn't want to stay the same throughout your life. There's no character development or personal growth there. So I think, yeah, reframing it as a positive thing and not being so scared of change, I think is, yeah, really a positive thing.
Also, we can't, looking back, I hate this whole thing about staying young. Nobody can stay young. It's such a negative, totally negative societal structure for everyone, because we can't stay young and we want to grow old. And we all know, I mean, God, I've lost people even recently, losing a really good friend and colleague at 50. People don't want to die at 50. We don't want people, we are absolutely devastated when somebody's, goes too young. And yet we make life difficult for people to stay, you know, functioning and flourishing later. It's madness. We have to change it around.
Yeah, agreed, completely agreed. And I think that's, yeah, a great note to end the podcast on. So thank you so much for coming on today. It was so interesting.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a really nice conversation.